Hello everyone, welcome to the lecture 4 of this 10 lecture course, and today we are going to talk about part 1 of the 2 lecture another sub series, that is tools for fishery oceanographers. And in this part we will cover acoustics. So starting with the history, that the history of acoustics, first time one experiment was done in Lake Geneva in Switzerland, that shown that sound travels faster than the air in the water. So what this experiment particularly did was, one physicist and one mathematician, they were in the two different boats, and they were 10 miles apart from each other. So first boat, what you can see on the left hand side, it had a mechanism where by pulling a lever it will create a kind of a spark or a small blast like a firecrackers, and at the same time it will ring a bell underwater that you can see. And another person who is sitting on the receiving end will look for the spark, will look for the sound that comes in the air. Note down that timings particularly very in a very precise way. And at the same time the hydrophone that you can see underwater they have devised, it is basically a kind of a hollow tube with a diaphragm underwater that captures the underwater sound, and by listening to that manually you can listen that sound that traveled underwater. So with that they derived the conclusion that first they saw the spark of the blast, then the sound underwater came first, and then the sound from the air of the blast that came. So that gave them the first conclusion that sound travels faster in the water or underwater than in compared to air. So to understand why it happened, we need to understand how what is sound and how it travels. So a particular sound is basically a train of waves where the whatever medium it is passing, it will compress the molecules and it will stretch. So air is a thinner medium, as you can see here in the terms of red dots. So it will create a kind of a compression and stretching of the air molecules. Water is thicker medium, and metal or other any solid medium, it will travel accordingly. So how much compression happens and how much stretching happens, it depends on the thickness of the medium. And that is the reason that the thicker the medium, the faster the sound travels. And to understand that further, we can see that like imaginary that, okay, if the air was visible, how sound, each of the sound will travel. So each of the wavelength, if you can see that there is a crest and trough. So crest of wave form that is very known to us, this wavy pattern below on the right hand side, it corresponds to the crust corresponds to the compression of the air molecule, and then wherever the trough is there, it creates a kind of a low pressure. So that is how sound wave passes through the air. And here two things are also important to understand: the relation between wavelength and frequency. So as we know that wavelength is the distance between two crest or two trough, so that will be like a particular wave is considered, one wave is passed. Frequency is that for any unique reference point, how many waves are passing, or on the other way around, if a particular stretch of time period if you take, within that how many waves are fit in. So the low wavelength and long wavelength and low frequency waves will be accommodating only, for example, one wave in this example where I have shadowed it with a purple color. And within that, the short wavelengths, which are the higher frequencies, so three of the waves are already accommodating in that. So that is how the energy release is happening. So that's how the low frequency waves are low energy waves, and high frequency waves are high energy waves. And how it is important is that you imagine yourself when you are trying to enter a very a place with lot of rush, subway train, or a mole at the opening of any huge cell. That time, if there is a low crowd, then you can make your way immediately. So then in the thinner medium, it will be easier for a wave to pass. Then in the thicker medium, it is like a crowd. So you have very lot of difficulties to pass through that kind of medium. So crowd is a medium, and imagine yourself as a wave. So that is how it is difficult. So high energy waves which try to accommodate many wavelengths together. So that you can imagine in a way that if you are trying to accommodate yourself in a crowd empty-handed, then you can imagine yourself as a low frequency, low energy wavelength. Then it will easier to pass. It is easier to go through without any exhaustion far. But same distance of a crowd, for example, any music festival is there and lot of crowd is there. Now you are not only trying to pass yourself, but you are trying to pass along with lot of say soda bottles or crates of soda bottle in your hand, and then you are trying to pass through that crowd. It will become lot of difficult. You will get exhausted very fast. Same happens with the waves underwater as well. So high energy waves, being also high frequency waves, they go through like less of the they can penetrate less of the water column. So that is how you can understand what is the range of the sound when it at different frequencies. So here you can see that as the frequencies are low, it can actually travel fast, not fast but travel far. But then when the frequency increases, the penetration in the water column, it is getting limited. So that is how the principles of sound are the like basic principles. You can understand that. Now what kind of water column properties, sound velocity, it depends. So sound velocity underwater, it is directly proportional to the temperature. Temperature increases, it makes the water column thinner relatively, and the sound speed will increase. Salinity, when it increases, it also helps in the propagation of sound. Pressure, when it increases, it also increases the speed of sound. As we know now that from the first slide, that thicker medium supports to the particular speed of the sound. And what else can actually affect? What factors are there that can affect to the speed of the sound or the sound movement underwater? So surface properties you can understand as that any rainfall that is happening, or the waves are there, if it is too wavy, the surface is there or not. So those are the surface properties. Column properties, as we saw, that temperature, salinity, depth, those are the column properties. And bottom, what kind of bottom is there, whether it is rocky or sandy, or it is silt, or the bottom is even or uneven. So those are the like other factors that will define how sound will propagate underwater. And under column properties, different structure of the columns will also determine how sound will advance in the water. So that is like if the frontal structure is there, then how the sound, it will affect the movement of or travel of the sound. What is the mixed layer depth, whether eddies are present in that particular area, that is like cold core eddy or warm core eddy. And season wise also, when the column properties change, it will determine that how is the sound is propagated underwater. So here is the like another phenomena. When we see the surface properties, bottom properties and column properties, reverberation also will happen. Reverberation is a little bit jargon term. In simpler form, you can understand it as an echo. So for example, if a marine animal is generating any sound, that will be reverberated or echoed by the surface, by the bottom, as well as where the column properties are changing. And that actually can be seen here in terms of the density of sound or energy of sound. So in this particular experiment, the propagation of sound that was studied, you can see that the source of the sound is there in upper left corner, where the highest energy is there in terms of red color, and then it is propagating. So you can see that first refraction happens. So now we know about the refraction of light when the at the interface of two medium. For example, the pencil in the glass filled with half filled with water. So pencil will look broken. That is refraction, because the light will get refracted. Similarly, refraction also happens to the sound waves. Also, same as light, reflection also happens. So reflection from the surface and reflection from the bottom, both happens. And wherever those reflected waves from the bottom as well as on the surface, they meet, it is called convergence zone. Again, you can see that the energy is little bit higher. Rather than cyan or blue color, it is in green color, the energy that you can see at the convergence zone. So that is how the sound also exhibits refraction and reflection properties. And this is unique. We came to know about this since that experiment in early 1800s, precisely around 1830s, it happened. But animals have been knowing this since last many thousands of years. They evolved like that, and that is how they propagate their mating songs or their communication with each other through the particular unique virtual tunnel inside the water column, which keeps on reflecting and reverberating the sound. And that's how the sound travels sometimes up to thousands of kilometers. So that channel is called SOFAR channel, sound fixing and ranging channel. So SOFAR channel is basically, it is being used not only for the navigation but also for the mating and for communicating with other animals of the community. So that is how animals are using these principles without actually knowing the way we know them. Now, what are the applications? So within first 10 slides, I tried to cover the fundamentals of sounds so that you come to know about like how the acoustics can be used or can be useful for a fishery oceanographer. Now, there are different ways in which the acoustics can be used to monitor biodiversity or for the fisheries applications. So first one is the passive one, where either you try to study the noise in the ocean, which affects to their physiological processes, or you are trying to study the animals themselves with the help of PAM, or passive acoustic monitoring, where you try to study their songs or clicks or their activity index with reference to particular different sounds. For example, mating calls will be different than the navigation sounds, and when they try to threat each other for the territorial behavior. So those all can be studied in the passive acoustic monitoring, or PAM. And active ones are, examples are sonar or ADCP, different type of surveys, bioacoustics, fisheries acoustics, and different kind of telemetries. So in this sequence I will cover that. First we go through this noise in the ocean. So noise, as we know that human presence will create artificial noise which otherwise wouldn't have been occurring in that particular region. And major source is different kind of ships, because our major activity in the ocean, it will involve always the ships, whether it is a research ship or cargo or a military ship or otherwise, or any other kind of passenger ship also, or say fishing boats are there. So all of them will have engine and propellers, and it will propagate the sound underwater because of hull is submerged underwater half, right? So this is the map that shows the shipping index or activity index. So here the blue color is like a low frequency of ship passing, red color are the major shipping channels, and accordingly to that particular region in the ocean, it is subjected to the artificial noises generating from those ships. So what other sources could be there? So passing ships are there in terms of propeller, that is one. When you are trying to establish some infrastructure, whether it is oil pipeline or optical fiber network for high internet, or whether you are doing the oil and gas exploration surveys, it will all create different kind of sounds or noise, which are otherwise it wouldn't have been possible. So the oil and natural gas explorations will typically involve two-part machinery. One will be like the air gun or the sound blast. So it will go through the water column, it will go through the seabed, and any anomaly in this seabed consistency, it will be recorded when it comes back as an echo by the hydrophones. So that is how the explorers determine that some areas are not all rocks, but it contains oil and gas. And how it affects these kind of sounds, it affects to the biological functions. So when the animals need to communicate with each other, for example, they are migrating in a group, and then they need to communicate with each other. So that it will hamper, because obviously that is a lot of noise. Now you cannot hear each other. Then at the time of mating season, the mating calls will be disturbed, so that mates will not be able to find each other, and basically the recruitment process will get affected heavily. Then many of the animals make use of the sound to determine the location of their prey. So for them also it will be very much difficult to feed themselves, or for example sometimes prepare themselves for long migration. Then they will not be able to take successful migration. Then they will not be able to do the proper breeding by not reaching timely in their breeding grounds. So all those things will be affected, because that is all like sound is what they have in the ocean to communicate with each other constantly, and that's where we are hampering. Other than the anthropogenic sources, there are some natural sources also. For example, underwater earthquake happen, that time it will create a lot of noise. Then if rain is happening, then based on the intensity of the rain over the sea surface, that also will create a kind of a noise. Then a cyclone is there, but these are all natural phenomena. So basically what happens that natural phenomena will have its own seasonality, and sometimes it is too far from each other, those kind of events. For example, underwater earthquakes, it will not happen everywhere at a particular time also, at particular place also. It will not happen very frequently, like every day. So that is not posing that much threat to the biological functions at the community level as much as the anthropogenic activities does. Having said that, all the anthropogenic activities are also cannot be ruled out, because for example, we need to make use of the echo sounders, and then we make use of that. We make use of the acoustics to map the sea bottom. So that is important for proper navigation, and that is also important for the exploration. So what kind of exploration? So whether it is about the marine archaeological applications, any sunken ship is there that need to be mapped, or to lay the infrastructure. So for example, in the other photograph where it is there, so when you need to determine the ideal path to set up oil pipeline or optical fiber network, so you need to also do these kind of bathymetric surveys precisely, and for that also sound is being used in different forms. Another very important criteria or application is to determine the underwater currents. So here is the example of acoustic Doppler current profiler, which make use of the Doppler phenomena, so that it can come to know that whether the particles are coming closer to the sensor or it is moving away. So the principle behind this is that water cannot be directly seen moving, water parcel cannot be seen directly moving by sensor, but the particles within the water parcel, when they are moving, the sensor will measure that. So basically it is going to track the particles in the water with the help of sound and with the help of Doppler effect, and then it will determine how much fast or slow the underwater current is there. So study of the currents is also very much important for the fisheries oceanographer, because it will help you determine that if after successful recruitment, if the eggs and larvae are going to be drifted to an area which is natural shelter, and it is going to get enough food for their survival, or the larval mortality is going to happen because the current is not in the favorable direction, and now it will be drifted in the non-favorable location. So study of underwater currents, it is also very much important for any fishery oceanographer. Now biologists, basically their prime interest in the studying biotic factors they came that we don't want to, they came up with the idea that, or the notion that no need to stop just by measuring the physical property, that is the current, but can we also determine that what that particle is, whether it is an egg, or it is a phytoplankton or a zooplankton, even then it is a copepod, or what it is there, what particle it is there. Then if that can be resolved, then it is a very much boon, because then you can study the classification of the particle also. So that gave this kind of basic understanding. Lot of experiments gave this the equivalent spherical diameter is there of a particular organism. So right from the nanoplankton to the large nectans, so different diameter size. It will be like okay, in that particular class, what are the suitable frequencies to study them, to see them underwater basically, but not seeing in terms of optically, but acoustically. So this is the basic graph that gives you the idea that what frequencies are suitable for what kind of we should say what kind of to study which particular organisms. So here also you can see that the frequency actually it decreases when you go upward, and that is the reason that ultimately the penetration in the water column also, it is accordingly, like we previously seen, that it will depend. So then once you know the frequencies, you can actually use multiple frequencies and then study multiple classes of the organisms at the same time. So whether it is like I want to study the zooplankton biomass with relation to movement of the fish, and then I want to also see them if they migrate vertically or not. So that also I want to study. So that is also possible if you merge multiple frequencies. And you can easily study this kind of diurnal phenomena. For example, during night time, the zooplankton will actually rise and be stable to close to the surface. At the daytime, they may prefer to stay at the deeper depths. And in that also you can see that during daytime, almost first 50 meter is devoid of any kind of organisms. But based on their behavior or species, 50 to 100 meter it is very well spread out. Whereas there are like different other type of organisms which stay at those depths even at the night, but others will occupy the upper water column. So that is how the different species behavior of the diurnality that you can study here. And when you study that long enough, for example for a whole year, you can actually see that how it is changing season wise. So here the below axis is the time in UTC, and each of the photo is taken for a particular month. So there are 12 photographs running in the loop, and it is showing 12 months. So here time is in UTC, but the location of this particular observation was somewhere in the northwest Canada. So the time difference of about 8 hours. So here what you see 12 noon in the center, it is almost around 4 o'clock in the morning. That's where the dawn happens. And 2 timestamp back, 4 o'clock where you see that it is the previous evening, 8 o'clock in the night. So now you can see that when the month changes in the bottom of the timestamp. So now, because it is in the northern hemisphere, so during the northern hemisphere winter, the night time is long, and the top duration for the zooplankton to be there near surface, it increases because night is long. And then now as the summer approaches, you can see that it is slowly decreasing, because night time it is decreasing, day length it is increasing. So you can study the seasonality also when you have the observations long enough. In terms of fish, the detection happens a little different way. We talked about refraction. So from any medium to another medium, when a sound wave it enters, it will show the kind of a refraction and as a resultant scattering. So now what happens is that water column is one medium, fish body is another medium, and then fishes have something called swim bladder. So those swim bladder are filled with gas. So gas is an entirely different medium. So that is why wherever fish is present, because of the presence of a swim bladder and their less density, it stands out as a like a totally different signal. And that is what you can see in terms of, for example, here in the bottom figure, the green color line, it is shown as a deep scattering layer, because that's where the sound waves are scattered a lot and you can get a lot of backscatter. So that is how fish is being detected. Now deep scattering layer also shows diagonality. So here also, because the food is available closer to the surface during night time, the deep scattering layer will shallow, and during it will shallow farther on the darker nights. It will not shallow that much on the full moon night because light is still penetrating. If the ocean surface is calm, light penetration is more. Then also the shallowing will be very less in compared to if the ocean surface is rough. And daytime, when the light penetrates, ocean is calm, for example, light reaching to the depths, this deep scattering layer will be deeper. So that kind of diagonality also it is already studied. And to explore this kind of myctophids or other resources, this sound is being used very extensively. Now use of sound for the fisheries, it has evolved a lot since that first experiment in the 1830, which is on the top of this timeline. It took 100 years to come up with the printed echograms, where you can say that okay, we have identified fish schools, and that had a little purpose for the regular fishing, because it was time consuming process and it is not at all expertise of everyone, not for especially for the fishermen. And when eco-integration happened, it only looked downward with one beam, so you can see something only in one plane. So there is no even 2D map is there. Some spikes you can see, and but research went on, and then dual beam started giving depth information also. So to get the depth idea, we need to have two eyes. With one eye we cannot get information of depth. Our smartphones also need to add another depth sensor. That's how now we have the multiple cameras, because it need to determine the depth, and then it will, for example, blur your background when you are on your online meeting or you want to take a portrait mode photo. So that's why dual beam was important. So and then split beam was introduced. Now two beams are actually propagated perpendicular to each other. So they were perpendicularly phased out. That is the reason that they will never interfere with each other. So split beam had a benefit of that. In that also, till 80s mostly only single frequency was being operated. Then multiple frequencies were introduced that will resolve different kind of size class of the organisms. And then the technology with miniaturization of the electronics in the 90s, it came up with the multi-beams, where you started having 2D, at least 2D maps. And then in case of optics, we call something called hyperspectral. So instead of only some spectral channel, we get continuous across the frequencies data. So that was also introduced under broadband. So now you are not limited to a particular some frequencies, but in some cases you can also get continuous acoustic signature, and that along with the multi beams gives like a very good picture that I will show in the next slide. So that is where the technology has reached, and because of that, that will become a future norm, that side looking multi-beam, multi-frequency or broadband, the sensors will monitor the fish movement and fish behavior, fish shoals, either for the commercial fishing or for the research purpose. So this is how it is used. This is the example of the particular software where you buy the hardware and along with what software is there, that gives you the path where you have been, say for example last one day or past few hours, and then when you mapped that, what was the seabed depth, So you can see some up and downs in this gray bottom. Also off bottom you can see different colors. So here rainbow actually denotes to the density of biomass. So fish schools which are very dense, it is shown in terms of red color, which are very scattered, it shows in terms of blue color, or almost there is no signal where the fish schools are not present. So this can be used very well for the research purpose. And what are the benefits? So the fishermen who use this kind of technology for only qualitative estimation, that whether I need to put net here or not, scientists further go and then they try to quantify the biomass also. Now you need to do the surveys by doing the fishing. It is kind of an intrusive method. So you are taking out that kind of biomass out of the water and then you are studying. But for example, somebody tells that you need not to do that. You need not to decrease this speed of the ship, say from 4.5 or 5 knots to 2 knots only for fishing, and still you get the data on abundance of biomass. You will opt for that, right? Because it is on the go and then you can cover the larger area. So when you are studying the species at the habitat scale and not only in the smaller area, acoustics can help you a lot. Why? Because there are studies that shows that if you do the trawling, for example, how much you can water volume you can study by trawling in one day. If you do the same with the acoustics, you can cover 1400 times more of the water volume. So now you can see the difference that the conventional fishing, it gives some extra information, but it is not always advisable to go and do along the coast, because either you will require a lot of ships, or if you only deploy one ship to study the whole coastline, by the time you finish one lag, that whole season will change. So if you need to do that seasonal level surveys, that you need to cover the longer coastline for say within 2 weeks, then the acoustics will actually help a lot. So that is the reason that NOAA Fisheries in the USA have included acoustics as a part of their standard operating procedure. And this is the example of one such survey that you can see that the survey transects are there, and corresponding to that sea bottom is seen. Some areas are shallow, some areas are deeper, and with reference to that, what is the fish density. So here also the grayish colors are the less dense, and then red is the very high accumulation. So what a fishery oceanographer would like to, why would you would like to know that? Because you need to then compare that with different environmental parameters. Okay, what is the temperature at which the fish wants to aggregate? What are the temperature they don't prefer to aggregate? And then it also adds to the predictability. So next year, whether the same kind of favorable environmental parameters are existing in the area or not, whether the development of such favorable conditions are on time or it is late and then fishes arrive for breeding, and after that maybe 1 or 2 weeks only the favorable conditions develop, then the success of the recruitment and larval mortality, everything that you can predict in better way if you have this kind of information beforehand. So for that you need to have the multiple years surveys, and then only you can come up with the behavior that is resolved for a particular species, and then you can have better predictability that okay, this particular stock will have a boom or bust in the next season. Another type of use of acoustics is in terms of telemetry. So I am covering in few slides the telemetry part because that is in conjunction with the next lecture tomorrow. So out of the telemetry, different type of telemetries, acoustic telemetry is where acoustics is being used. And you can see that these kind of tags are the marvel of miniaturization electronics when you compare their size with a small coin. So you can see that these are the injectable tags. Basically you make a small incision in the fish body and you insert these kind of tags, and then based on the sensors attached inside those tags, it will record pressure that will give you at which depth a fish is swimming, and then it will record the, for example, some tags are there where there are outer portion, there is inner portion, and then it will also record the inner body temperature and outside ambient temperature, And then some tags are also having if fish mortality is there or not. So those kind of sensors also it will have. So these tags are injectable, and basically it will transmit kind of a signal, to listen to which you need to have a hydrophone array. So this is the example of a juvenile salmon in which the tag is inserted. Now we know that salmon goes upstream for the breeding purpose, and in that process they will also have entered through the estuary. Then they will come close to some dams or dikes, and then similar example in the Bay of Bengal example or scenario, it is for the fish hilsa. So where you know that through the narrow channel the migration happens, you can strategically install those listening hydrophones, where the acoustics data that is being collected, it will be transferred to this hydrophone, and basically it will transmit to you either by satellite uplink, or you can download that when you recover the hydrophone after the migration season is over. So that is how the acoustic tags collect the data. Every time such kind of setting up arrays may not be also possible. For example, what if your species of interest lives under the ice sheets in the polar regions? Then how do you study them? Because the hydrophone arrays will not have satellite uplink. It is difficult also to access that for regular download of the data. Then some of the advancement also make use of other animals that coexist in the same area. For example, seals that feed on that same species or other species, and they will have two types of tags. So one tag will be like a hydrophone receiver, and that will collect the data from the fish. For example, in this case, this VMT35 return, it is listening from the data from the small fish, and through the Bluetooth it will transfer all data to the another GPS tag. So whenever seal has got its food and it comes to the surface, or it is basking on the ice or on the shore, at that time it will transmit all the data collected for the fish of your interest via satellite. So that is how also some of the animal platforms are being used. And the future, next 10 to 20 years, you will see that scientists will be very often deploying these tags, not only to study the behavior of that particular animal, but also for the environmental monitoring. So for example, if I put a tag on a fish, I am not only studying the movement and migration of the fish, but also the fish will collect the water column property data like temperature and salinity for me. So the using of the animal platforms for this kind of environmental monitoring, that is the near future that you can, as a future fishery professional, you would probably be working with such kind of data. So with this two-part series of the first lecture, I'm ending here. If you have any questions, you can put in the live chat box, and I'll answer them one by one. Set little bit, yeah, that is better. Yeah, put in center. That will be fine. So on my last slide, as well as on the YouTube, that video description, email ID is also there. But if you have any question right now in your mind, you can ask, or afterwards also you can put the questions. As a standard practice, all the slides and everything will be shared also with all the participants at the end of the course probably. And this YouTube video will also be available. So after going through that, those slides or the video, at that point of time also, if you have any question, you can put by email, But if you have any question right now, I'll take that. Okay, there is a comment, and it is very witty one, that healthy coral reefs actually guide the fishes like a lighthouse attract to the birds, and probably that is how they have evolved, because the healthy coral reefs are rather welcoming thing for the fishes, and if it actually happens, it is not surprise. If that was the question, you can actually rephrase your question and ask properly. Otherwise, as a comment, it was a very nice one. So impact to marine organisms due to acoustics is that it is a kind of every technology is a two-way sword. But then what is your intention? So for example, if you are a fishery resource manager who is actually going to make use of this acoustics data for better management of the resources, in long run, it is actually good. And whether you are using the same frequencies and same season or same location where they are trying to meet, they are trying to have mating, that also it is important. So most of those frequencies are chosen in that way that it rather monitors with the like biomass, and it does not interfere with the frequencies at which they communicate. So most of the like research purpose acoustics, I would say that it is I don't say totally harmless, but not at this level of concern as far as my knowledge is there. Yeah, another question is the type of this technology would not encourage overfishing. Now any technology that is being put to use, so already like eco sounders have been in use since decades, and there is no policy to stop that. So that is a different thing. But ultimately the biomass that we monitor for the research purpose, then it is not always about overfishing, because when you know the stock better, when you know the stock behavior better, you can manage the stock better. So knowing the fish presence and the environmental conditions that requires for the fish presence, it is not always leading to the overfishing. How you make use of that information, that determines that. Another question is about type of technology. So can we detect fish schools in the sea using acoustic method, and to which depth? So the answer is yes, and the answer is that how you are monitoring. So you are monitoring based on the hull based sensor, then based on the penetration of the beam, that monitoring will happen. If the species of your interest, it resides at deeper depths, you will have to probably establish a hydrophone array so that you can actually study the deeper dwelling fishes. And the identification of fishes are done by biomass reflection. Yeah, because like I shown in the slide, that the swim bladders do the scattering. So more fish is present there, more swim bladders will disrupt the signal. So based on that, the backscatter will be more, and then you can actually determine the biomass. So that is how on those lines scientists are trying to convert the signal strength to the biomass conversion. And the use of this type of technology by the fishing industry, again same question I have already answered. some of the fishes of aquatic animals using acoustic for communication. Is there adverse effect? That is already covered under this noise part. So if you are actually operating anything, whether it is for the research or for the commercial purpose, for the on the same frequencies where fishes communicate or any mammals communicate, then you are disrupting that. But if you are determining the biomass on the different frequencies, then the frequencies that they communicate, then it should not be any adverse effect to that. So that is there, and then fishes are aquatic animals. Identification of fishes done by biomass reflection. Fish schools and sea accustomed to this structure. Technology is reached using. Okay, jellyfish and biorobot. So the acoustic sensors have not been put under on Argos as of now, but acoustic sensors have been put under surface that robotic vehicles have the acoustic sensor underwater, and that cut down the costs a lot. So the surface vehicle will move along with the wind and currents, and it will also transmit the data with the help of the power generated by the solar panel sensor dangling beneath it. So that is the answer. Jellyfish directly, the specific frequencies and all that science is not matured, but the research is there ongoing. New questions, it seems, repeat questions only. Is it possible to detect different fish species? Yes, based on their size, it is possible. Age, also possible, because juveniles will be smaller and the adults or sub-adults will be larger. So up to some extent you can determine the size variation, but that may not always mean that age. For example, if the adult class is malnutrition and they are not grown up very well, then also it will lead to the false count of juveniles. So you don't want to use it in a standalone manner, but you also need to do sometimes sporadic fishing to continuously keep on validating your acoustic signal. So service span, power on board, injectable tag. Okay, very good question. So the injectable tags, the miniaturization, it happened. So you can determine these, like predetermine these tag like days at liberties, and then or the life or the session, or you can say it's mission life, from ranging from few weeks to few months. So that is at the scale these acoustic tags are being used. So since they are smaller than in compared to satellite tags, which I'll cover tomorrow, it has smaller battery and it is used for smaller fishes and to study the species in a particular within that season. So for example, the migratory species which are passing through a channel or like that. So injectable tags have their own limitations, but it gives a wealth of the new information that otherwise it was not available. And so I think that covers all the questions so far. If any questions, you can always put a mail, and we are ending this session right now. So thank you for attending. If you have not been able to attend live, then you can attend maybe you can go through the video at your own convenience. Do attend the test to get the e-certificate, and we hope you enjoyed the video. Closed? Live stream ended? You can end the live stream? Yeah, it is closed. I don't know from where to end the live stream.